Typically, a Kaizen event is a short duration, a short period of time where you do rapid improvements. It's analogous to if you were going to eat the elephant, maybe take the whole leg in 4 days, and then you're left with action items at the end of the event. So it's very episode, or we say episodic type of improvement events. Kata is a routine for practicing and becoming a part of your daily continuous improvement culture. It's taking small steps, so maybe just a small bite of the elephant. The 5 questions keep you focused and targeted on how do you want this process to operate in the next week or 2 weeks out, and what obstacles are keeping you from operating in that target condition. We step back and look at the current situation and then develop experiments or PDCA cycles to try and go around those obstacles to get one step closer to that target condition. Every day a step closer, and all of this is in line with the vision and the challenge for the company.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I've got Andrea Simpson from NEA Baptist Memorial Hospital in Jonesboro. Good afternoon, Andrea. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing pretty good, pretty good. So today we're going to talk about the Get Better Jump Start process that Andrea and I worked on some whenever I was coaching her there at NEA, and how she has just taken it and flown with it and made it incredibly successful with all the different versions. Andrea spoke about this at different Lean consortiums. She spoke at KataCon. For those of you that went to KataCon 7, she was a hit the last day there as well. So hopefully you'll enjoy Andrea getting into some of the nitty-gritty details of Get Better Jump Start, which we may refer to as GBJS from time, because that's just the language she and I are used to using. So for the audience, first of all, can you explain the initial Get Better Jump Start concept? You know, when Dr. DePriest asked Skip, how can we look at doing Kaizen events as well as Kata, as well as these other TWI programs? And so we had that initial concept from doing the experiments that you and I practiced, which were the first 2 that were really the official ones there at NEA. So take us through that timeline and what that was like while we were
Okay.
virtually coaching.
Yeah. So you may know a little bit more about the initial concept than I do because I think I was on the back end. So Skip one day was talking to me about something called Get Better Jump Start that Dr. DePriest wanted. That was almost like a Kaizen event, except it's done Kata style. And so instead of having this big, huge event with a bunch of energy and success, and ending with an action to-do list, you would just use Kata to do that. And so he had asked me if I would help you, Brandon, and him create a facilitator guide that any competent Kata coach could take this facilitator guide and go do a Get Better Jump Start. And so that was my original initial maybe concept of what Get Better Jump Start was. And so at that point I didn't really know what that was.
Yeah, for our audiences, I'd done 4, I think it was, at Memphis and maybe 1 at DeSoto, or a total of 5, and they were really gradual, build on each other as we learned, we changed, and a lot of it was up here in my head, and I had another engineer helping me document stuff as we were doing it, but as in true engineer style, as Andrea has pointed out, that it didn't really go well with visuals that healthcare needs. So you can go ahead and go on with.
Yeah, and I just remember asking Skip, well, how can I create a facilitator guide? I don't know what that is. And he said, yes, you do. It's just Kata. And I'm like, oh, okay. I know Kata, do Kata. Brendan had been my coach for a couple years at this time. And he was just like, you know, you and Brandon's going to coach you. He knows what it is. We just need your creativity to translate it into healthcare and to really give someone a document that any competent person can take and run with it. And so I guess you and I started coaching. What do we do? Weekly sessions for an hour on Fridays?
Yep, for about 9 months or so.
3 years ago? 18.
18, yeah,
Yeah.
and on into
And
the
so
fall of that year.
I quickly learned, you had sent me the document that you and a couple people maybe had created about what Get Better Jump Start was. And I quickly learned that I needed to be inside your head because it was not on the papers. It was in your head. And so we just started having weekly sessions. We did that Kata Style. So I developed a storyboard, like a project-based storyboard right here in my office on the wall. And we would have virtual sessions about an hour. Um, Maybe sometimes less, sometimes even more, just depending
Yeah.
on the creativity and kind of where we were in the facilitator guide. I felt like I had a good understanding of what Get Better Jumpstart was, but I was still not sold on this facilitator guide. And so I felt like I understood what you were trying to achieve with Get Better Jumpstart. I felt really the only way I could really get a grasp on this facilitator guide and write this facilitator guide was to actually do one. And so I think that week, I think we had our session on Friday, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go to our shepherd's meeting on Wednesday and get some. We're going to get it to be our first guinea pig, I guess, for you and I to experiment with, but also to help someone in our facility to meet a goal that they wanted to meet. And so that's where Sean Riley, he was the director of rehab services, was like, me, I need this. I want it now. I need it now. I've got to have it now. I need to make some changes and I need to make them quickly. This is perfect for me. Can we start tomorrow?
And we went from almost zero in our minds as far as understanding any current condition, just and maybe a challenge, to 90 miles an hour. Sean was saying we've got to get this going in 45 days or else.
Yep. And so we printed the guide, and I like to use it. So printed this, and we just walked through it and used it step by step. And we sat down just like we formulated, and just used it and ran an experiment against it. And there was a lot of learnings that came out of that. That Get Better Jumpstart was incredibly successful. Sean's team was highly engaged, highly motivated. They had some very competent Kata practitioners. They had some novice to advanced beginner, but they were very successful. So me and Sean and Tammy, so I was the facilitator, second coach, Sean was the coach, Tammy was the learner. We did daily go and see type experiments, learning our current condition. And so we would go and actually go walk the Gemba, learn our current condition, every detail of the current condition. We did Kata at least once a day, sometimes twice a day, just because of the urgency of this particular challenge. And we were going over Thanksgiving and Christmas too, which you advised against.
So that was requiring actual coaching cycles. So every time you met, you went through the
We
card.
did. We did. We set up a storyboard and we started mapping out our value stream. And that's what those Post-its were, was every step, basically a big block diagram of our value stream. And so as we got to a point of, well, we don't know what happens next, that became an obstacle. And so we would write down that on our obstacle storyboard. And depending on who owned that process, or whether it was a transition from acute care to post-acute care, or physical therapy, inpatient nursing, whoever owned that process, maybe it was the nurse liaison, then we would bring them in to help us go and see and learn that current condition. And so we would switch learners as we learned and built our value stream.
And so when we started, then that was all leading up to the current condition, and then we have the actual 3-day event, which is the Kaizen event style, or event actually, but done Kata style. In other words, rapid PDSA. So kind of take us through those first 3 days of what an event, and you can use the one from Sean's for an example.
Yeah. So at this point in time, our very first one, so we spent a lot of time prepping, learning our current condition, getting our storyboards ready to go. So once we learned our current condition, it was very obvious to us where we needed to start. So even though we were going to do rapid PDSA for 3 days with all parties on deck, we also knew that we couldn't go too broad. We couldn't do everything in 3 days. And so we kind of narrowed our focus into, we picked 3 separate focus processes and went ahead and put together our storyboards for day 1 of the event. And so it's important for us when what we wanted to happen was to be ready to go. That means a full storyboard, current condition, and a full storyboard target condition set and ready for day 1, just to maximize our time with all parties and all those focus process experts in that room for those 3 days. And so leading up to day 1, not only did we spend several weeks learning our current condition, but then we started putting together our storyboards. And as you probably know, I'm sure you've coached many boards that struggle getting started.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's important to understand everything about your current condition, your block diagram, how you're playing the game, how you're going to measure success, your outcome metrics, to go back and get some data, maybe 2 to 3 months of data if you can. If you can't, obviously any data will work, but you want to have all that ready to go so that you're not in there day 1 spending all this time doing data collection. So day 1, basically you kick it off with, how we kicked it off is we kind of set an agenda for a standard Get Better Jump Start of how we want every Get Better Jump Start to happen. And so that's aligning the team with the True North statement of Get Better Jump Start. So the Get Better Jump Start has a goal that we want to achieve. And then also our challenge. So aligning the entire team with our entire challenge statement, and then going through our entire value stream current condition and an entire value stream of a target condition.
I think we asked that question of each group. Please stand up and present where you're at on your board, so that all three groups are all on the same page. They might have known most of what they were doing, but there probably was some stuff that was educational for the other 2 groups as each group presented, right?
That's right. And so since due to the nature of how we gathered the current condition, not every day was all parties in there to identify the learning. And so that's really important, and that's why we wrote it into the facilitator guide, to do that with all team members at attention so that they understand how one process affects another and where they are on their current condition and what they're trying to achieve, and so that everyone understands is on the same page together.
Right. The inpatient rehab is an entire system that had 7 of those processes going together, and the 3 that we picked, they needed to understand how they related to one another.
Yep, and how they affected each other.
Okay.
The downstream. And so spend a good 45 to 60 minutes just spending dedicated time on that before we kicked off. And that is successful. We've actually evolved from that, and we've gone from that to now having everybody kind of state their why this challenge is important to them. And it really puts a personal spin on it, and it really connects to purpose when you do that. And so we've added that into the guide now. So after we do that, then we do a full 5-question coaching cycle at all 2 or 3 boards.
All boards. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So everybody's listening to the full 5-question coaching cycle, and we'll have, inpatient nursing, their focus process. They do a full question coaching cycle. We'll have the therapy piece. They'll do a full 5-question coaching cycle. Pre-admission workup, they would have a focus process board. They would do a full 5-question coaching cycle with everybody in attention. And then from there, we would spend the rest of the morning, every team simultaneously would be doing rapid PDSAs. And so those rapid PDSAs started with, what was your last step? So then they would go, the learner would maybe go do a step. A lot of times the coach and learner would go do a step, go onto the floor, do something, try to remove it, eliminate an obstacle. And then they would come back and they would immediately dump their data on the storyboard and do like a mini, okay, so what happened? They would sit there and do their PDSA and their reflection and their planning right there. And then they would just go on back to it. And so they would just do this constantly the entire morning session.
And in some cases, somebody would come back to go through put their data up and go through, and then another group might come in. And so we might have 2 of the 3 groups in the room. I remember they went through their cycle. Group 1 funneled down to their obstacle, talked about their step, what happened, what they learned, were they staying on that obstacle or moving. And then at that time, if they were in the room, I think you would turn and say, okay, now team 2, they would go through theirs, but then both teams go and split out. But a lot of times they were in there just one at a time. They would come in.
Yeah, they were. And it really didn't, if you have coaches and learners assigned, that coach keeps that board going. And so you really don't really need any facilitation on me. Now, I am mindful to see if teams are getting stuck, just to make sure they're moving forward. Just kind of listen from a distance. Just as a coach, just to observe and just to make sure they're not going down a rabbit trail or something. But we've gotten it to where the team's just rapid PDSA. It's just like rapid fire. They come and go, in and out. Then it's time for lunch. And so I like to gather everyone about 15 minutes before we break for lunch and do another 5-question coaching cycle, so that each focus process area can see where the other is related to their target conditions or anything, obstacles that they've eliminated, and any big wins that they want to share, just to give that team like a, here's where we are, break for lunch. We're going to come back from lunch and you're going to go right into your rapid PDSAs again. And so
that was key, because if they come back from lunch and they don't have a step or an action to go and do, sometimes it takes a little push to get them going again. So it was key that they had left for lunch knowing they had an
what
action.
they're going to do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so that's what we do the first day. The second day we do the exact same thing, minus the the connect to purpose and the true mission.
Right.
True North, we don't do that obviously, but we do an entire morning session of rapid PDSA. We start each session with a 5-question coaching cycle and end each session with a 5-question coaching cycle. And then we do that in the afternoon of day 2. And so by the end of day 2, the team naturally starts to get tired. They hit a lull. Day 1, day 2 morning, they get real energized. They're excited. And you can kind of see the mood. It's just it's been a trend in the afternoon. And I think that that's common when facilitating events, I've learned recently. And so you kind of have to be mindful of that and know when to, rev up the group, or maybe it's time to everybody go for a Gemba walk. Let's all go see this, or let's do a fishbowl, or like what you like to call it, or just something to kind of, just to be mindful of the mood in the room.
Right.
Because day 2 is a long day.
Right.
And then day 3, it is all morning session. You do the same thing, rapid PDSA. And the afternoon's a little different. You only have about an hour of how we've developed the agenda here of rapid PDSA, because we want to spend some time developing our follow-up plan as a team. And planning, we also do a report out session to our senior leadership team. And so we want to show our administrators, our senior leaders and physician leaders what we've accomplished in this room and where we still are towards, or how close we are to our challenge, or how far did we advance our work, or how much did we jumpstart it. So
right.
That's what 3 days look like.
Yeah, for our audience, these team members are totally dedicated to this. They're not doing their other jobs. They already have arranged with their managers that they're going to be pulled away from their job to do this, to be dedicated to it, or it kind of falls apart. if it.
That is correct. And we actually have that in the facilitator guide because that's important. We want our senior leaders to understand. We want that the very first step in the facilitator guide is to make sure the senior leaders are on board and they support, and this is important work. Because if they're on board and they support this, and that these people have been identified that 10 weeks from now, or 8 weeks from now, or 6 weeks from now, they're going to be in this room for 3 days as if they're on PTO, then it's just so much better. You don't have to worry about them being pulled out. And so everybody already knows well in advance that she's not available. She's on the beach in Hawaii. You need to call someone else.
Yeah.
So,
how did the report out go? I think I remember that, and Brad being very excited. Brad was the CEO at NEA, for those of you that aren't aware. He's at Memphis now, taking over Dana Dye's role there. But he was pretty excited and jazzed up about it, I think.
He was really excited, and I just remember him he questioned our math on, and it was that's one of the reasons Brad's such a good leader. He questioned our math. How did you get, I think we advanced like 17 and a half weeks, and he was like, hold up, how did you get that math? And it was real simple math. Every day we quantified the number of PDSAs that we completed. And in normal, Brad also has taught us and has tried to really push that improving the work is the work at NEA Baptist. And that's a great mindset, great to have in practice. But when that happens here, we average about 3 PDSA steps a week on average. And so it was really simple math to do. When we're doing daily kata, then we average 3 a week. But if we're in here and doing this rapid PDSA, I mean, there were days that we did like 21 PDSAs between all the boards. And so you just get a lot more improvement for your time. And I remember him saying, I'll trade 17 weeks for 3 days any day. Like, that's so much more efficient. We still have not met our challenge.
We catapulted into the future so many months because we had several PDSAs that didn't take 1 or 2 days, but we're still not all the way to the challenge.
Right. And so I think with the inpatient rehab, I think we have met target condition on 5 of the 7 focus processes, but we still had 2 left. And so we developed our follow-up plan, complete with the coach, the learner, the days and times of the week that we're going to be having these kata sessions. And then also what came out of inpatient rehab, which I don't know if we had in the guide originally, was a master kata board that houses all of your metrics. So as you meet a target condition, we would transfer that metric to our master kata storyboard and continue to measure that for sustainability, draw an intervention line, challenge met, target condition met, or whatever it was. And we would continue to measure that until we met our challenge in its entirety. And so that did come out of that first Get Better Jump Start. And so that's important to go ahead and set that up right there in your event, so you don't leave with to-dos.
It's good job relations skills to be able to do these effectively. I think you did a great job of doing that the first couple of ones that we did, and I'm sure you keep doing those. Talk to us now about today's Get Better Jump Start. What have you learned since those first couple of ones, or what things had to change or needed to change or were critical from those first days to what you're doing now? I know you've made some improvements, so help our audience understand.
So I learned a lot when working with the inpatient rehab team. I learned that, one, they had to trust me as a facilitator. They don't know what a facilitator is. But in order to coach and improve them and help them improve their work, they had to trust me. In order for them to trust me, we had to build relationships.
I think probably a lot of the trust is probably coming in the weeks leading up to it. a
Right.
lot of leaders say, wow, 6 weeks, we can't just spend 6 weeks studying the current condition, just jump in and do the 3 days.
Yeah.
But the pre-work is what makes the 3 days so efficient. If we don't do that, I think we've learned on one occasion, if we don't do that, if we only have a week to do the prep work, we're not going to come out with usually a fully functioning several PDSA storyboard at the end of the 3 days.
I would agree. And so I learned that relationships are crucial to improvement work, for sure, with inpatient rehab team. And it's funny you say that about a lot of leaders want to just go fast and hard and they just want you to jump in. And we had our second one was actually a perfect example of that. We had, our leaders were super excited about this because we had just presented what's next. Well, can you fix this? Do this now. I need this now. And so, we had all these things there was a lot of people wanting another Get Better Jump Start, and you and I were just like, oh, wow, that was really good. Okay, we learned a lot. Let's translate all this into the facilitator guide. And so, but something else was born when we were just trying to create this guide for Skip. And so, the second one, there was, okay, I want this and I want this now. And we were very limited with space. And so what we experienced, what I know now, I didn't know then, and Skip helped me to learn this, is scope creep. And so we were pushed to go faster and harder, and the topic was changing. And so not only were we going fast and hard, but the challenge kept changing. It was kind of, well, now it's this. Now we want to do this really, and it was because we were learning our current condition.
Right.
And so what I learned, the big takeaway from our second one was I had to change my mindset that that's okay. There are going to be times that we need to go faster and harder, and we need to make improvements when we're not ready. And maybe we don't have 10 weeks to prep. Maybe we only have 4 weeks, but it was still very successful.
Yeah, because our goals were, our target condition is to understand the current condition and set a target condition at the end of this.
And set a target condition. And so that was really a lot of learning for me because, I just wanted to be like, well, no, let's wait and let's figure out what we're trying to do. And, sometimes you don't have time to do that. And so a lot of learning, big learning on scope creep, and in addition to relationships. So the second one was even more important to develop relationships because these were people and experts in the clinic. And so I didn't know any of these people at all, where I had known and worked with several of the inpatient rehab. They at least knew me. And so a lot of relationship building was important in that one. And I just remember having so much fun in that Get Better Jump Start. And we were high-fiving and making jokes, and it was just really a lot of fun. And I had went into that thinking, this is going to be a disaster. I think you and I had talked about that, and I was so anxious. Were you there for that one too?
Mm-hmm. Those were the first two I think that we did, and the second one was the one that Brad threw out there. That it had several different outcomes. Like I said, the outcome metrics kept changing, and no, and it's not what we really want. We really want this outcome metric. Well, we actually want both, and there's a lot of go and see and stuff, and so we kind of double teamed that one a little bit to make sure that team didn't just stop, understand the current condition.
And so that was really a lot of learning from that one, from just my own development, I feel like. Not so much for the facilitator guide. Although there were some edits that we put in there about scope creep and how to adapt and how to be aware and know that that's okay and that that's a real thing and that you will have to go faster and harder than you're comfortable with. And when that happens, you need to be able to adapt to that to still be successful. And so we added that to the facilitator guide. And then heart failure. Heart failure was a lot of learning. from
Not
heart.
that you had heart failure. The subject matter was heart failure, right?
Yeah, so heart failure readmissions is what we were working on. So this was our third one. And so this one, huge value stream. I mean, huge value stream. So we've got clinic, just, family practice, outpatient, ED, inpatient admit, post-acute discharge, post-acute care, care coordination, all to prevent the patient from readmitting within 30 days. And so ended up doing 53 PDSAs, I think, 50 something PDSAs. I have to check my notes or check that report out session. And so the guide after heart failure changed significantly. And so I had the pleasure that Sylvain Landry and a colleague of his, Stylianos Houlis, I believe, came to observe. And so he had heard about Get Better Jump Start and about how we were evolving or improving Kaizen events. And he wanted to come see that and write about it. And just kind of learn, and I ended up learning so much from them. So I'm so thankful that they spent the time to come and observe and just sit in the room and just watch. And I'll never forget Sylvain. I think it was Stylianos. He leaned over and he said, "You're so calm. Why are you so calm?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "Typically in Kaizen events, the facilitator's just sweating bullets and it's just, just on
all different directions.
just so calm and relaxed." And I was like, "Well, this is the easy part. The hard part for me is the current condition prep work. That's the hard part for me. I've got everyone's full attention in here. They have a clear expectation. They're away from their work. They're allocated into this space. They know exactly what they're trying to achieve. They each have a coach with them. I'm just kind of listening, but this is the easiest part of Get Better Jump Start, in my opinion, is this event." And he was just like, "Oh." And so that really kind of got me thinking about, he really started talking to me about facilitating and all these roles of a facilitator and just soft skills and hard skills and just things that I didn't even know about. And so I think that we ended up I've added 10 pages to the facilitator guide of just the things that I do, not the hard skills, but how I facilitate the group during the prep work or the event. And Sylvain was sharing with me a model. Let me see if I got it right here. Like this Y model where you're constantly hovering between, as a facilitator, you're hovering between, do you want to be the expert or do you want to coach and facilitate? And that's kind of where that was really interesting to me. I didn't even know that existed, but that's what we're doing when we're facilitating or leading these events, is we're just coaching them. We're not trying to be the expert. We're not trying to push them out of their comfort zone, like with Kata content or technical skill. Like he asked me, Sylvain, privately, "So obviously this board has some flaws on it. Why aren't you coaching the improvement? Like, why aren't you coaching to correct those flaws?" And I said, "Well, my goal in this room isn't to advance their kata skill necessarily. It's really to get them just engaged in doing the work and improving the work. And if I were to go interrupt and, try to coach to hey, this process metric isn't really a metric.
Pick at it or pick at something that they've done that's
Yeah,
not perfect.
it would deflate the energy.
Right.
And he shared with me this model, and he was like, you're doing that naturally. You just didn't know that it had existed. And so I'm trying to put those little tactics that I do into the facilitator guide, because we've learned that not every competent Kata coach can facilitate a Get Better Jump Start.
Any final must-dos or any final learning from failures that you would say were ahas or light bulbs came on now that you've done 4 of these? I know the soft skills you've mentioned are very important. Being a competent Kata coach as a facilitator is important. Building relationships, obviously, that you mentioned that as being a very vital to, and that comes in the early weeks too. If you're allowed the good 6-8 weeks, you can build that relationship over time. But any other must-dos or critical learnings that you can think of that our audience might find enlightening?
I mentioned earlier that the 3-day event's the easiest thing. So the hardest thing is to keep the group engaged in meeting during the prep work. So 6 to 8 weeks of prep work, you have to show up. You have to just show up. You have to put it on your calendar. It has to be your habit. You have to show up as the facilitator every day. If not every day, 4 times a week. That's crucial. If you show up, no one else shows up, you need to start texting, hey, I'm here.
I'm waiting on you.
Yeah. And they're like, oh, I'm hung up. Okay, what time's good for you? Just holler at me. What about 3? Or, just offer a different alternative, because if you don't show up, then they're going to stop showing up.
Right. They're
And
taking
so
the cue
that's
from
been a
you.
crucial learning. Same thing exists for after the event is over. That very first coaching cycle, target condition, all the way through that next target condition is crucial, so that the team doesn't just fizzle out or lose momentum. They're going to naturally lose momentum, so maybe that's not the best word, but they need to keep pushing to meet their challenge. And sometimes when you get back to now improving the work is the work, we're back to daily kata, you lose intensity.
Right.
And so showing up after that, and those coaches that you assign, those shepherds that you assign to those boards is absolutely crucial. They have to understand that their number one job is to just show up. All they have to do is show up. And then the process experts will do the work, but if they know you're showing up, then they'll show up.
Right.
So for sure, the prep work and the follow-up work is crucial to success. That would be one thing for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think you've done an outstanding job with it from the very beginnings of the hodgepodge event that I'd started trying to bring to something that could evolve, to documenting it on the guide. And I've seen you at work. I've seen you exhibit all the soft skills that you're talking about are in those 10 pages. I'm sure probably came out of your head onto those 10 pages. And
it came from the words of the teams.
Yeah,
actually.
feedback and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Andrea, I want to thank you for joining us and for talking to us about Get Better Jump Start. Anybody wants to hear about that or know more about that, we do the same type of event here. We call them Kata Jump Starts, that continues coaching commitment. But Andrea, you've hosted people from outside that have come over and watched those. Maybe a little difficult now with COVID going on, but thank you, and stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you. Thanks, Brandon.
All right.